Well, anyway, Gordon Clarke, a member of ours, and a member of all sorts of other things as well,
Yes, a few other things.
is going to talk to us tonight about just the Australian content or
Just the 3 Australians in the PDU.
photographic unit that operated out of the UK in PRU Spitfires. So you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Bob, and happy birthday once again. Okay, as you can see, Aussie's in the PDU, Photographic Development Unit, and the tagline, high and fast, and you'll see where that tagline applies later on. Okay, the PDU came into effect mid-January 1940, was around for about 6 months or so, and in that time I managed to track down 3 Australians. One of them you'll know very well. One of them I expect you won't know, and probably the third you probably might know him too. As you can see there, 1 Queenslander, 1 Victorian and 1 New South Welshman. They were the first people for the idea of high-speed reconnaissance. Okay, in the beginning, in the late 1930s, let me just go back a step. All the stuff that I read about the PDU, and I watched the movie Last Plane Out of Berlin, which some of you, I guess, have probably seen, about Sydney Cotton, and stuff you read, they all seem to either imply or state that the Brits were the first with photographic reconnaissance or high-speed reconnaissance. That's not true. I found that the Japanese were about 4 years before the Brits. And they had, in 1937, 100 of a plane called a Mitsubishi Ki-15. The Allied code name for it was Babs, and they had about 100 in 1937, and they were, I've got a picture here, you can come out and have a look at the book later. They were a single engine plane with a long glass house, and even though it had a fixed landing gear, it was 20 miles an hour faster than the fastest fighter the Russians had. And that was the Polikarpov I-16. And so they couldn't catch it. Also, too, as an aside in that, the Japanese were the first to use this plane as a command and control aircraft as well, something I didn't know. Okay, so in the late 1930s, the Secret Intelligence Service purchased 3 Lockheeds from the French. They contacted businessman Sydney Cotton, and he's our Queenslander of those 3, born in Bowen, the Bowen Hospital anyway, and he agrees to collect the photos. The reason I approached Sydney Cotton is he is selling film to a whole lot of different companies and stuff all the way through continental Europe, and the Germans and the Italians. And the Secret Intelligence Service says, we want this guy because he can get in and out, whereas we can't. And so Sydney Cotton picks up a Lockheed 12A, he modifies it, he puts some 2 big cameras just behind the pipe, the co-pipe, shooting down through the floor of the plane. And ironically, he puts a couple of cameras in the wings as well, and they were German Leica cameras. And I imagine the irony was not lost on Sydney Cotton. And between March and August 1939, so it's before the war starts, he and his Canadian co-pilot are flying, Robert Niven, of course, there, are flying over and photographing German installations, German airfields, Italian airfields, Italian naval installations and everything, and getting some valuable photographs. On one of their missions to Italy, flying over Italy, they flew over, took their photos, landed in Rome, met up with people and stuff, and then flew on from there to Malta. And at Malta, they ran into a flying officer, Morris Shorty Longbottom. Now, the nickname didn't come from his surname. He was short in stature. So that's how he got the nickname Shorty. Anyway, he was very interested in what Niven and Cotton were doing, and had quite some long conversations with them on Malta. Later on, he's posted back to England and the conversations continue. Whenever Niven and Cotton are in there in London, they are talking with him. And so the ideas of this high-speed photo reconnaissance idea is a collaborative effort. Often Cotton says that it was his idea, but I think it's very much the case of a collaborative idea. So Sidney Cotton, a well-known photo of him, and I had to put in, there's birth date and everything, I had to put in the fact that he was educated at Toowoomba Grammar, because that's where I'm living at the moment. So it talks about his, for those people who don't know, he was in the Royal Naval Air Service in World War I. He designed the Sidcot suit, which of course is named after his name. The interesting thing about the Sidcot suit is I'm writing a book at the moment about number 69 Squadron AFC. They were later renamed 3 Squadron AFC. And of course, when the RAF was formed, they were reintegrated again, and 3 squadrons still exist today. They're flying F-35s. Anyway, several of the diaries that I managed to get of the aircrew, they didn't like the Sidcot suit. They don't say actually why, but they preferred the big, heavy, they got big boots that come up to about the thigh, all fur-lined, big leather jacket over their uniform and other jackets and that, and they preferred that to the Sidcot suit. Our friend Manfred von Richthofen, he preferred the Sidcot suit when he was shot down and killed by some Australian gunners or an Australian rifleman. He was wearing a Sidcot suit that he'd pinched off some Allied pilot. He ended up having an argument with someone. He was a very prickly sort of person, Sidney Cotton, and he resigned from the Royal Naval Air Service, 1917, went back to Australia, tried to join the AFC there, and they wouldn't have him. So when war starts, Sidney Cotton's still in his Lockheed 12A, and he's flying over down the east coast of Ireland, photographing remote bays because they believed that the Germans were putting submarine refueling places in the bays. As it turned out, they weren't. But that's what he was doing. When he got back from there, the Air Ministry had agreed with the Secret Intelligence Service to build up a flight and put Cotton in charge of it all. He then became, they were given a commission. He became, I think initially he was squadron leader, and very quickly he became a temporary wing commander. When he got going, they were given 2 Blenheims, and very quickly after that, he wanted Spitfires. And it's obviously what him and Niven and Longbottom have been talking about. And he starts going back to the Air Ministry and saying, you know, we want these Spitfires. And eventually he gets 2 used Spitfire Mark 1s. What he does then, he does something similar to what he's done with the Lockheed. He starts stripping it of the guns, the 8 machine guns, the ammunition in the ammunition bays. He pulls out the radio. He pulls out armour protective plating. The only thing they leave is the protection plating for the pilot, but everything else goes. They leave the self-sealing fuel tanks. And then he puts in the inner ammunition bays in both wings, he puts in what they call an F-24 5-inch focal length cameras pointing down. They were angled in slightly, and they were I guess the armament of the photo reconnaissance Spitfires. And he picks a civil airstrip called Heston as I guess as a camouflage, as a way of deceiving people. So it's even though it's a military installation base, they're at the civil airstrip at Heston, and they get called the Heston flight. Okay, there you can see about mid-September, the first Spitty turns up. We've talked about the modifications that are done. What I didn't mention was once he'd done that, they put some plaster and Paris and stuff into the hollow rivets and that, and sanded all that down. Once that was done, they've been toying with the idea of camouflage for these planes at altitude, and they had a thing called camo tint. And the Spitfire there on the right-hand side, and I've got to thank Juanita Franzi for sending that to me, as you can see there. That's not a Spitfire Mark 1, by the way. That's a later model. And that was one of the initial camo tints they came up with. Next one they played around with was a duck egg green, they called it. It was a sort of bluey green. And later on they used a blue colour as well. Anyway, so once they painted that, it was sent off to RAE, and Cotton had asked them, he wanted a 30-gallon tank behind the pilot in the spot where the radio was. And the RAE said, no, we're not going to do that. It's going to upset the balance of the plane. The other thing he requested was like a teardrop shape. I don't know if you can see it there. It's just in there. Yeah. Can you see it there? Just in there.
See it.
Just there. Yeah. It's a teardrop shape on both sides of the canopy, the sides back. And the primary reason, when you read stuff about it, they say, oh, that was for allowing the pilot to look down. Well, that was, but the primary reason was for allow the pilot to look back, because at 30,000 feet or 31,000 feet, they created contrails. And of course, it was like, warning lights, flashing lights to anybody on the ground. The Luftwaffe and that, they saw contrails in the sky. They might not be able to see the plane, but they knew the plane was up there. So it was very important that the pilots kept sort of fishtailing every now and again and checking, putting their head right into that teardrop shape and looking back to see they're not creating contrails. Cotton later on issued his pilots with a little lapel badge. It had CC11 on it. It was supposed to be Cotton's commandment, number 11. Yeah, thou shalt not be seen, yes. It sort of had a double meaning. The top brass in the RAF didn't think too much of it, but Cotton would always say, oh no, you've got not to be seen by the enemy, and the CC got other various names like Cotton's Crooks. There was another one, Cotton's Club. He was pretty lackadaisical with his pilots, and they loved it. As you can see there, it was renamed 1st November 1939. There is France now, it's trial by height and speed. The first Spitty, well, actually the second one they got, and a Hudson and Lockheed was sent across to France and to a place called Seclin in, as you can see, November. The detachment was now called, so they had the Heston flight back in England, and the detachment was called the Special Survey Flight. That's Sydney Cotton in his jacket with his back to us. Inside the cockpit there is Shorty Longbottom. The two pilots that were flying the first two Spitties were Shorty Longbottom and Niven, Cotton's previous co-pilot. The first flight was, as you can see, written there, 18th of November. He flies the first photographic sortie, and this photo is taken as he's starting up the plane for that particular sortie. So that's the 18th of November, 1939. The areas that they covered were the Ruhr, all the industrial area, the Ruhr, the Siegfried Line, German troop movements as they moved into Holland and took over a place like that. And then the last flight by the SSF was about mid-January. So they're there for about 2 months. And in that time, it vindicated the concept of what Cotton and Niven and Longbottom were saying, because they covered, in that 2 months, they covered twice the area of the other PR assets that were operating there with the BEF and the AASF. Do we know those? AASF is the Advanced Air Striking Force, and the BEF was the British Expeditionary Force, both operating in France at the time. And from early September 39 until January 1940, they had about 7 squadrons of Blenheim bombers that were doing reconnaissance. They were not high-level stuff, it was all low-level stuff, and they were often harried by Messerschmitts, the Bf-109s. And in that time, in the 2 months that the Special Survey flight was operating with one Spitfire, they covered double the area that these 7 squadrons did in 4 months. In that 4 months, they lost 17 Blenheim bombers. And how many Spitfires they lose? 0, correct. Not one. And that impressed the Air Ministry. They were really on side now. And Cotton, who'd been trying to push for more Spitties and stuff like that, was about to get them. The other thing too that was interesting, when they had this one Spitfire there, obviously the Germans would pick it up on radar and that, and it was just going so fast that stepping back a second, the Bf-109s they were using were Ds and Es at the time. And so they found that the 109s couldn't get to altitude fast enough. The Spitty was in and out at that time, okay? And the Germans then started trying to keep a pair at 30,000 feet. When they knew the Spitfire had gone into the area, then they would set up near the border, some 109s circling around 30,000 feet to catch him on the way back. And they couldn't even catch him then. The interesting thing I forgot to mention before is the standard Spitfire 1, which these 2 photographic Spitfires were based on, had a speed, it was about 10 mile an hour faster than the 109s. It had a speed of about 365. Depends what book you read, it can be as low as 360 and as high as 369 and stuff they come up with. The Spitfire, after all the modifications that was done at the Heston flight, they were capable of 390 miles an hour. So the standard Spitty, so they're about nearly 30 miles an hour faster than the standard Spitfire 1, which is about 10 miles an hour faster than the 109s. So as you can see, at that speed, it just left the 109s in the dust. So it's all vindicated. Covered their thing about and half the time the Special Survey flight covers twice the area that the Blenheim PR assets did. So in roughly mid-January, when the single Spitfire comes back to England, the Air Ministry are well and truly on board. They now want to take the Heston flight off the intelligence service, and they want to sort of formalise things. And Cotton has been asking for more Spitties. They're going to give him 8 more Spitties, and they're also going to give him 3 Hudsons. And we'll talk about the role the Hudsons play in this too. They did some PR work, but mostly it was the Spitfires. So one of the things Cotton wants to do, and certainly the BEF and the AASF in France and the army there, and the French too, they want the Spitfires back. And so Cotton says, righto, we're going to create a squadron, just an obscure number, 212 squadron, and he's going to create 3 flights of 2 Spitfires. Before he sends them to France, he modifies the Spitfires again, as per the previous one, but does some extra things. He goes back to RAE and says, you know, I want a 30-gallon tank behind the pilot. And I said, no, you can't do it. He said, well, I've been flying a Spitfire in France for the last 2 months with one, and there's been no problem. So they put it in. The other thing they do is that they've got that extra tank in, and there's at the front windscreen, there is a thick bulletproof glass for protection for the pilot. It's quite thick. It's got to be thick enough to stop a 30mm shell, which they knew the Bf-109s were using. So that goes as well. And then they start calling this new plane a Type B. So it's a Spitfire Mark I fighter that's got all these modifications that the previous Spitfires had, plus these extra ones as well. And they call it Type B. And the first 2 Spitfires, they retrospectively call them Type A's, and then they modify them to Type B status. And so he's now got 10 aircraft that he can choose from. And as I said, 6 go to France. I just want to stop for a second there, because we're going to be introducing the first of the Australians pilots coming, and the second Australian to join the PDU. But first of all, obviously the obvious threats to the PR Spitty is enemy aircraft. Flak was not an issue. The cold was an issue, of course, and contrails, which we've already covered. Other issues that they found in the single aircraft that they used in France for those 2 months was that the camera that they were using, the F-24 5-inch, was giving detail, but not enough detail from 30,000 feet. So the new Type Bs, they pulled out them and they put an F-24 with an 8-inch lens in them to take the photos. And there's 2 of them, again, 1 in each wing. The pilots themselves found that, think for a moment, the flight profile was they took off from the airstrip up to 30,000 feet or 29 or 35 or whatever, and flew over to the target area, turned around and came back also at that height, and then dropped down to land from 30,000 feet. So majority of the time, they're breathing oxygen all that time, and they're finding that such a long period of time was giving the pilots headaches. And now that they've added in more fuel into the Spitty, they're going to be up longer at those altitudes, breathing all that oxygen. And so what Cotton institutes is that there's a rotation period. So even though in a flight, there's 3 flights, there's 2 Spitties, he's got 4 pilots, okay? Another thing they suffered from was mild cases of the bends. Never knew that. So when they're going up and down from 30,000 feet, they started suffering from the bends. They also suffered dizziness and things like that. So on top of all these other things, there was these personal aspects that happened to the pilot. And, you know, and these guys knew before, when they hopped in the seat, in the cockpit, they knew what was going to happen, and they still kept going all the time. The other thing too, of course, I mentioned before, there's no radio. Once they're up and gone, whether it's from flying from France or most of the time later on from England, if they don't come back, they've got no idea what happened. None whatsoever. You know, your bomber crews, they had radios. They had a radio operator who would tap out Morse code saying what's happening. They had pigeons on board. They could send a message. Coastal Command were the same. But the PR Spitty pilots, once they're gone, you're either dead or a POW, or maybe in a hospital. So I try to put myself in their situation. I thought, will I go and climb into a Spitfire knowing all that beforehand? I reckon they were brave. They should be given a gong just for hopping in the plane in the first place. Okay, the criteria for future pilots, what Cotton wanted to do was that even though they're flying modified Spitfire fighter aircraft, he doesn't want Spitfire pilots flying in the PDU. The reason being is your Spitfire and your Hurricane, and also your Bolt & Paul Defiant, that was also another aircraft with the Merlin engine in it, they would take off, they were point to point, they were up, hit the enemy, turn around, come back down, rearm, refuel, and back again. Their time in the sky was, you know, an hour, 90 minutes at the most. And Cotton, Cotton didn't want those guys because their navigational skills weren't up to par. Now we've got these guys with flying the Type B Spitty that are out there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. They needed good navigational skills. And so what Cotton does is he sends around the word into the ferry battle squadrons in France and says, how'd you like to fly another Merlin aircraft, Merlin engine aircraft, that's a lot faster and a lot easier to fly, but doing secret work? An Australian flying officer, Harry Day, says, yep, put me in, and he joins them. Bit of information about Harry. He's our Victorian in the list, so we've covered the Queensland Victorian. Joins the RAF in 1935. He solos, does his basic training, and then he embarks 6 months later in January 36 for England for a short-term commission. Do people know what a short-term commission in the RAF was? Do you know? It was 4 years, and they would, quite a few Australians did it. It was a program instituted back in 1926 And the idea was the Australians would go over there, get the benefit of all the training of the RAF pilots. And back then, of course, most of the trainers were World War I pilots. Not that that wasn't happening in Australia, just more of them over there. They gave them a commission and they would serve 4 years in the RAF, and then they could come back with all that valuable knowledge to Australia. The last ones that went were July 1939. But anyway, Daesh is going in January 36. When he gets over there, does his training, they assign him to 218 Bomber Squadron, flying ferry battles. Do people know the ferry battle?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Don't need to cover that. But they have a crew of 3, and the pilot is really pilot and navigator. The second guy behind him is sort of the bombardier wireless operator, and the guy up the back, he's armed with a single pea shooter. And so Cotton wants the pilots because of their navigation skills, their flying ability, and also they're flying a plane with a Merlin engine. So it's easy to hop out of there into a Spitty and fly that. So that's his rationale. Daesh joins in February 1940, and his first stop is almost his last one there. He's up in a Hudson taking off, heading over to France to do some PR, and he gets attacked at about 500 feet by 3 Bf-109s. The saving grace with the Hudsons, they had a turret up the back with 2 pea shooters in it, 2 303s. Daesh will be, of the 3, he will be the longest serving member of the PDU. He goes to France with one of those flights. I couldn't work out which flight he was with. And there are the areas that he was looking at, was the Siegfried Line and the German advance, the build up behind the lines, also mapping out areas where the defence was for the Allies, the French and the Brits and stuff. And then while there, was promoted. In March 1942, mobile trailers turn up. The purpose of them was they were assigned to a flight each. And so when the pilot came into land, because Cotton wanted to get the information back to the right people as quickly as possible. So they would land, the ground crew would get the cameras out of the wings, rush them over to this mobile trailer, which was set up as a mobile photographic development unit, and they would develop it. And they would make 6 copies of every photo, and they would palm them out to the French, to the British. They'd send a copy back to England, and other RAF squadrons, part of the AASF and the BEF, got copies as well. And so they were getting stuff, very quickly after the aircraft came back. Also, while I was there in the March 1940, they get more Spitfires because Cotton is pestering them all the time for more Spitfires, and Dowding's reluctant to give up too many, but he keeps giving them used Spitfire Mark 1s. And Cotton's happy with that. They modify them all, and these new ones, they're called a Type C. Their modifications are a bit different. You'll see under the starboard wing a bulge. Can you see the bulge there? Just right there. There's one also under the port wing, about there, but you can't see it, it's lost in the shadows. In the right-hand wing, there are 2 F-24 cameras angled in, and that hence the bulge underneath, because they got the long focal length, and they are slightly overlapped to give a overlap area to help with the stereoscopic viewing of the photographic interpreters. And to balance that off, under the port wing, there's another 30-gallon tank of fuel. So this Spitfire now, the Type C, based on the Mark 1 again, so they're all just modified Mark 1s, has got a time up of 2.5 to 3 hours. So these guys, navigationals, they're going further and further. They're getting into places up on the Baltic coast, looking for the German, the Navy, Royal Navy, wants to know where the German capital ships are. So these guys have got to fly there. And so they're up for quite a while. If you want to go to the toilet, there's not much you can do up there. And so they're the Type 3s. I've got another slide coming up with Type C, sorry, of the Type C. But that there is one of the early Type Cs. So at all this stage, and even for the next model, the Type D, none of these are produced by Supermarine. They're always Mark 1s that are modified. Okay, before we get on to the top one here, see the difference in the cowl there? That top one is another Type C, not obvious on the previous photo and stuff, but they up so much longer, they had extra oil tank, and the only place they could put it was under there in the cowling. So there's extra oil in the Type Cs. There you are. There's the serial number of the first Type C I tracked down was P9308. After France falls, they all get recalled back to England, of course, and Daesh is flying his operations from Heston again, and that's the sort of targets they're looking at. And they're particularly interested in the capital ships, and they're really interested in the Luftwaffe disposition in France at that stage. There you are, the PDU pilots are flying in excess of 3.5 hours. That's a fair while to be sitting in a single seat Spitty that's not pressurised, and you're breathing oxygen, for probably 3 of those 3.5 hours. The bottom image on the right is the next model up, is the Type D. The third Australian rise. Anyone heard of Des Sheen? No? Okay, yep, a couple of you have, very good. Basic details, again, he joins the RAF again in January 36, so the same month that Harry Daesh is on a ship embarking for England, Des Sheen is joining the RAF. Same thing again, he applies for a short service commission in the RAF, gets it. He's posted to 72 Squadron, initially flying Gladiators. There's an excellent interview with him on the IWM website in England, and it's in 2 parts. And he talks about how he loved flying the Gladiators. They were a great plane to fly, he said. Anyway, the Spitfires arrive, and he starts flying the Spitfires. He becomes the first Australian pilot to shoot down a German aircraft in the Second World War, and it's a Heinkel HE-115 plane, and that's his first destroyed plane. In the December of 39, he makes his second claim. They're shooting down. He shares the shooting down of a Heinkel HE-111 bomber, but is hit and wounded by return fire from the gunner, and he spends time in hospital. When he recovers, there's a request that goes through to the PDU, and it makes me wonder if this was a bit of a test that Cotton was doing, because he sends through a request. He wants a pilot from a Spitfire squadron to come and fly with the PDU. Now, up to that point, he's only taken pilots from battle squadrons. Anyway, Des Sheen obliges, goes along, gets flown out to France by Cotton, Lockheed. And what they're doing is they want to photograph Italy. It's obvious to Tom, Dick and Harry that the Italians are going to enter the war any day now. And they want to know the disposition of the Italian capital ships, where all the airstrips are, what sort of numbers of aircraft are there and everything. So Cotton and Sheen and a couple of others, they head out to the island of Corsica. I'll show you a map in a minute, looking for airfields, because from southern France, they can get into northern Italy, but even with the Type Cs, they can't get into southern Italy. I think, Italy's sort of at a diagonal angle down there to the jackboot, and that's where they want to cover the southern area as well. And all this they want to try and do before Italy enters the war. Okay, here's our map. I don't know how much you can see it. There's a little red rectangle there from that little spot there, and they would fly out of there to cover. There's the border. This is all northern part of Italy. There's Rome. They would fly there, take their photos, and then fly back and land at Basra there. And that was their base. If they wanted to fly down to southern Italy, it goes off the map down here, they would be based here in Corsica and fly down and back again. Obviously, when Italy enters the war, they have to return to France, back over to here. Just gives you a good map. There's the border down here with Spain. Okay, the final days in France. Had to put this photo in. That's an F-24 camera with a 20-inch, but it shows you they were big and they were heavy, and it just gives you a good image of it all. Obviously, that was never installed in the wings. They had to install that in the fuselage. Bit of a strain on his face, but one guy just puts it. I'd like to know if he did it himself over his shoulder, or we got some of his mates to put it up there. Okay, they retreat to France once Italy joins the war in June, early June. While they're based there, they've got a single Spitfire, sorry, where in Des Sheen's flight. They've got a Tiger Moth, I don't know what it was used for, and they've got a Hudson bomber that's been converted for photo reconnaissance. Another use they used the Hudson bombers when they were eventually kicked out of France is they would go ahead of the Spitfires and they would do weather reconnaissance. So they would tell the Spitfires pilots who was going to be taking off and that, what the weather was like, what the wind was like at that particular altitude and things like this. Anyway, Des Sheen was about to go one day when all of a sudden these Italian biplanes, CR-42 fighters, appear over the field and start strafing anything that they can see. They destroy the Hudson. I don't know about the Tiger Moth, but the Spitfire's in a shed camouflaged away, and they missed the Spitfire. It eventually gets flown out by one of the other pilots, not Des Sheen. And Des Sheen watches all this from a slit trench at the side of the airfield. Anyway, during the combat, all of a sudden this French Dewoitine fighter turns up and shoots down 3 of the CR-42s. And all the Australians, Des Sheen and the others, are on the ground cheering and carrying on like pork chops. And then an adventure starts. The Spitfire's flown out by one of the other pilots, Des Sheen, some of the ground crew, and 1 or 2 of the photographic guys. They've got to get back to England. And it's a circuitous route. They go to Algiers, Algeria, then they go to Casablanca in Morocco, Rabat, it's further up the coast in Morocco, and then they eventually get to Gibraltar, and then they get some of them get a plane home, some of them get a boat home from there. And while Sheen is trying to get home, he doesn't get home. He leaves on the 17th of June, doesn't get home until the 12th of July. So he's nearly gone a month getting home. Significant changes to PDU once he's gone. The day after, they hop on the plane, to get out of France. The Air Ministry have had enough of Cotton, and they move him sideways out of that role, and they put in a Wing Commander Tuttle. That's Wing Commander Tuttle there on the right. They're trying to cut down on the excesses of Cotton, the flamboyancy, the lack of discipline that he allows within his pilots. And so Tuttle comes in. He eventually becomes an air marshal in the RAF. Part of the thing of trying to restrict Cotton, getting rid of him too, and also bringing the pilots into line, is that they want to take it out of the Air Ministry's control, and they want to give it to a command. They can't give it to Fighter Command. The battle for Britain is now going on. They can't give it to Bomber Command. They're up to their necks in work as well. So it's given to Coastal Command. And so when Des Sheen comes back, lands in England on the 12th of July, the PDU is no more. They've actually renamed it PRU, Photographic Reconnaissance Unit. Big change, 1 letter change. It's under the control of Coastal Command. They've got a new leader and after Des has given some leave, he decided to go back to 72 Squadron. So at the end of July 1940, there's just 1 Australian of the 3 still left, and that's Harry Daish. Just very quickly, just tying up ends, because that essentially has come to the end where PDU is now the PRU. But Sydney Cotton, when he gets moved sideways, gets bored very quickly, and by September 1940, he's looking at the issue of the massive bombardment that's happening. It's really the night blitz. They're still calling it the Battle for Britain until the 31st of October, but from early to mid-September on, the Germans are coming over at night in the bombers, and Dowding's fighter command is not stopping the bombers at night. So Cotton comes up with another idea. He said, we're going to have a paired aircraft, a twin-engine aircraft that has got radar on board, because we can't put the radar in the Spitties or Hurricanes or the Bolton Port Defiance. And we'll have then, with that paired aircraft, there'll be an attendant fighter, so that when the paired aircraft picks up when it's directed to the bomber stream and it picks up a bomber aircraft with its own radar, it turns on a light in the nose, big turbine light, that lights up the bomber, and the fighter comes around and says, shoots him down and says, thank you very much, and they go on to their next target. Nice idea. He takes it directly to Beaverbrook, who palms him off onto his second in command, Trevor Westbrook. And Trevor Westbrook says, sounds like a good idea. It's worth a try. We're desperate. We're not getting these bombers at night. And the planes they're mainly using, they're starting to get a few Beaufighters coming in now with the AI, which stands for aerial interception, not artificial intelligence or artificial insemination or whatever. And they are a few in the Beaufighter and a few in the Blenheim bombers. But the Blenheim bombers just can't catch the German bombers. So ultimately it doesn't work, and Cotton sort of goes to obscurity a bit. They sent him off to America for a while. And anyway, eventually he passes away just before his 75th birthday. And I got a video from Peter of a guy who goes around looking at various historical sites and stuff and issues within. Sorry? Robert Brayden, thank you. And he goes into this Talagalla cemetery. Probably, like myself, never heard of it before, but there you go. It's 8 or 9 miles, almost directly west of Amberley. So he's on a hill. He's probably got a good view out over Amberley. You can still see his planes there. Harry Daish, he continues on in PRU. He goes right through to December that year. So he spends 10 months in PDU and PRU. He then does some training. They then post him to be the CO of the 27 Squadron in India, flying Beaufighters. And at that time of the year, it's late 1942. So, late 1942 in the area, it's not until August. In fact, it's about the August when he turns up. It's not until August 1942 that there's the first victory against the Japanese on land. And it's at Milne Bay by the Australians. And up to that point, we've lost every battle in the Southwest Pacific. They've overrun Thailand, Malaysia, Burma, and now they've been posting there in India to try and make a stand there. So he takes on this squadron in quite dire circumstances. Survived a crash, elected to stay in the RAF after the war, gets married in 1948. He retires after 23 years in the service, and he never comes back to Australia, unfortunately. Passes away in Hampshire, and then read that this month before his 81st birthday. Quite a good time. He just recently, I think it was last month, I came across it. His 3 logbooks are still extant. So love to get hold of them. Had a look at what they're asking for it in the auction outside my meagre salary thing. Anyway, they're up for auction, and so they're still around. It'd be fascinating to read them, particularly his first one, when he's flying with the PDU and then the PRU, but also the Beaufighter ones. Des Sheen, the last one, he also survives the war. He goes on to have a fair bit of success in the Battle for Britain. In August, he shoots down 2 more aircraft, a German bomber and a German fighter. On the 1st of September 1940, he's shot down for the first time. 3 days later, he shares in the shooting down of another plane. The day after that, he gets shot down, wounded, burnt, but gets out. He then gets some training jobs and stuff. As you can see there, he's married in 41, has a son and a daughter. The son after the war joins the RAF as well, following his father's footsteps, and he did flying with the Red Arrows. He retired in 71 and passed away just 24 years ago, 83 and a half years of age. That's essentially it. That's the stories after the post PDU and during the PDU. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Gordon. If you just hang on there, we'll see if anybody got any questions.
Okay.
My name is Bill Wilcock.
Bill.
Nice to meet you and thank you.
Bill.
Unrelated. First one relates to your comment that they discovered pilots, after breathing so much oxy, were getting the bends.
No, they were getting dizzy in that. Bends was happening when they were coming from 30,000 feet down to come in to land, I think,
okay.
or take off at the other end.
I might be defective in my knowledge, but or deficient. I thought the bends was from an accumulation of nitrogen in the joints. The deep sea divers get it.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. The oxygen, when we say they're breathing oxygen, it wasn't just pure oxygen. It wasn't 100% oxygen.
Okay.
It was a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen.
Okay.
They're the two major components in the air.
Okay, thank you.
I think.
Second question relates to the cameras.
Yes.
My limited experience, again, when the cameras were used for photographic, amongst other things, when they were superseded from their bombing purposes by the Phantoms and then the 111. Flying at high altitude, the cameras had to be kept warm.
Yes.
Was that an issue, flying at 30,000 feet in the Spitty? So
it was indeed. Great question, because Sydney Cotton, I forgot to mention that, so thank you. Sydney Cotton, before he even got the Spitties, when he was back in the days of the Lockheed 12A, they were having the cameras fog up. And what he did is that they got him to run some ducts from the engine to duct in hot air over the cameras, and they never had them fogging up after that. So,
thank you.
When Cotton modified aircraft, they called it cottonizing.
yes,
So it was camouflage, getting the weight down, getting the cameras in and heating them. It was in the early days when the Blenheims were doing the photographic reconnaissance job. Not only were they getting shot down, they were coming back and the film was fogged. So it wasn't just a matter of losing the aircraft that the Blenheim had a problem with. It was the fog. It was the icing up of film, and Cotton knew the answer. That's why they went and recruited Cotton.
yeah. Thank you.
Any more for any more?
Well, just one of the bottom lines, the Lockheed 12A, GAFTL, still flies.
Yes.
It's been restored and it's flying in the UK now.
It was interesting. I came across a video in the research of a gentleman in the IWM who was doing that restoration of that plane. And he said that there are certain myths. He said they can't find anywhere, because in the last plane out of Berlin, he said that they had these little trapdoors that opened up and showed the cameras shooting down. The thing is, in the cameras that were in the wings, apparently they weren't directly down. They were actually behind the pilots, the vertical cameras and the co-pilot. And he said that just wasn't happening. They can't find any little motors that did these.
Yeah, I personally was involved in some of the early research without seeing the aeroplane.
Oh, right.
But Sydney Cotton donated what they call the Sydney Papers to the Australian War Memorial.
Oh, right. Yeah.
There's about 17 folders of photographs and documents in there. And that's where I did my research to see if we could find out anything more specific. For example, in Cotton's bio, he talked about having 3 cameras in the camera bay at the rear.
Right.
We were able to analyse the photographs that are in the War Memorial collection to determine he only had 2.
Yes.
And they verified that when they rebuilt the aeroplane.
That's
That's
And
the
that-
F-24s in the rear bay.
Yes, that was behind the pilot and the co-pilot,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yes. Yeah. There was
But the
mounts and-
Leicas in the wing, no matter, that was true, but how he did it, they really can't, they couldn't see it in the aeroplane
yes.
when they were restoring it.
How they-
Still, they may have come up with some other hypotheses, but when I was involved, they couldn't see it. One of the myths, and I found documents that proved that it happened, along with the documents sent to the War Memorial. Cotton sent a box of photographic components. All right.
Yep.
Now, everybody assumed that they were cameras. Well, the box never turned up. The War Memorial got the invoice for the shipping and everything else, but they had no record of receiving the boxes.
Box of photos.
No, boxes of photographic equipment, not the
right.
documents. They
Yep.
got all the documents, but they didn't get this kit in
Right.
which they assumed they were cameras.
Right.
The hypothesis I got was that when the Lockheed 12 was damaged in a bombing raid in Heston,
Yes.
Cotton owned it. All right, even though you call it SIS,
Yeah.
and that's correct, but it's also known as MI6.
MI6, yeah. I think it became MI6 later on, didn't it?
I've got
SIS part of MI6.
Cotton called it MI6, but
Okay.
I'm not sure everybody knew it existed to that name.
Yes.
Anyway, when the aircraft was damaged in this bombing raid, Cotton still, even though he was dismissed, he's technically owned the aeroplane still. That was part of the subterfuge of his spying.
Right.
That was he and his company owned it. If anybody examined the documents, so he got it shipped. He got it shipped. Now, who paid for the shipping? Got it shipped off to the US for repair. All right. So we assume before it went to the US for repair, this is myself and my sponsor, assumed that he took all the cabling and the wires and the ducting and the non-Lockheed standard things out of the aeroplane before it went to Lockheed for repair.
Yes.
All right. So he would have taken all the spy stuff out.
Yes.
And that's why the researchers became pretty frantic to see if we could identify and find this box.
Yeah.
So we ended up concluding that perhaps the War Memorial was expecting cameras, but the cameras were just standard military aviation cameras.
Yeah.
And what was special was all the other bits and pieces. And we suspect that that's what Cotton sent.
Right.
Somebody looked at it and said, "What's this junk?"
Chucked it out.
And where did it go from there?
Yeah.
I even had the opportunity to walk through what's their storage in North Canberra there?
Oh, yes.
In the suburb,
Beds.
the big
Mitchell.
Thank
but
you.
Mitchell Annex, that's it. But they wouldn't let me just browse. They just, all the staff in there assured me no such thing exists. I had photographs of what we expected it to be. They said, "No, we don't." They had just moved into this shed and they assured me that they knew what was in it.
Covering it up. It's interesting, just on that too, I've got to mention before, as I came across the three early gentlemen, Cotton, Niven and Longbottom, when they used to meet in London and that, in August 1939, Longbottom wrote a memorandum. I've got it here somewhere, the title of it. Anyway, in that memorandum, it actually sets out about flying, using a Spitfire as a fast, high altitude photo reconnaissance aircraft. And it's got all the figures of, what you can reduce, the weights and all that sort of thing, the weight of the camera and adding extra fuel and that. And it covers that under equipment, it's the Spitty, and then cameras and stuff like that. And it goes on through it. Right at the back on the last page, it comes up future possibilities or something like that. I've got the correct title here. And then under equipment, he suggests another plane that would replace the Spitfire down the track. And it's the Westland Whirlwind. And the prototype had flown at that stage. And it was also known the Westland Whirlwind was faster than the Spitfire. And I would say that they've talked with Cotton and Niven, saying we could cottonize the Whirlwind to be even faster than 390 mile an hour. But that was an interesting find.
I've got a copy of that too.
Oh, have you? Interesting, isn't it? Document.
Yeah, I've got a copy of it as well. One of the other things I found interesting was the detail about the photo film and the development process that Shorty Longbottom would have known nothing about. Only somebody like Sidney Cotton
Yes.
would have known about the chemistry and the processing, the quality of film. Those sorts of details were in there as well.
Yeah.
The paper was accepted and filed away and never actioned.
Was it?
Until Cotton.
Yes.
When the unit transferred to Coastal Command,
Yes.
was it still part of SIS operation?
No, they took it off SIS.
Ah,
Yes.
that's interesting.
Yeah. They took it off there. In fact, it was sort of almost, it was a pseudo situation too with Air Ministry. It was a toss-up who was really commanded. SIS said, no, we've put everything in. But Air Ministry said, oh, look, we know we've got Dowding to give you the Spitfires. We've got this and that done. We've got RAE involved and stuff. So to sort of quell all that too, at the background, they handed it across to Coast Command.
Gordon, what was the film format? Oh, sorry. What was the film format? Do you know? Would it have been 10-inch film back then?
The original one was 5x5. They also had 5x7, and they had a bigger one. I think it was 8x10.
Yeah.
The F-52.
Yes, F-52. All the F-24s, I think, were either 5x5 or 5x7. I don't think I had it here. That I thought there was an 8x6 too. Anyway, there were certainly those ones. So your digital cameras these days, a lot of people are going back to film, and you've got the large, what they call large format film, and you've got the cameras, with the bellows and stuff like that. They often had a 5x4 image plate.
The camera in the Canberra was a Wild model RC10 by memory.
Right. Yep.
But I wasn't an instrument fitter, it was their domain. But the footprint would be about half the size of that table, about a square footprint. Of this table here was, if you made that distance into a square, that was about the footprint of the camera.
Right.
And you needed a camera to carry it.
Yes.
It was.
It's a mapping camera.
Yes, it was. Yes, indeed. Not reconnaissance. Good point. And I think it had a 10-inch film.
10-inch.
And
10-inch square.
10-inch width, because it'd be on a spool.
Yeah.
So while it's mapping, the spool is running, and it's
But
just
even when they took the photo, it's a 10-inch width. What was the length?
10-inch width.
10 by 12?
10 by don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
Can't say, because as just pointed out, it's a mapping camera.
Yeah.
But I know well, I was radio trade, but one of the items on the pre-flight checklist for the instrument fitters was ensure camera boot zip undone 7 inches. And that was discovered by trial and error. If it was done up with only 6 inches to allow for the air to come out, the thing would overheat the camera, because it just took bleed air off an engine.
Yes.
And that would melt the emulsion on the film.
Oh, right.
If you left it open 8 inches, it would get too cold and the whole thing would just seize up. It would stop working. And so the 7 inches was the magic number for the instrument fitters to ensure the zip was undone. And they were designed and built by the RAF. The safety equipment workers manufactured these things. It was just a vinyl backed canvas with a big zipper. And so you manhandle the thing in place. When you did the zipper up, it just sat in place.
Right.
I don't know that there was anything else to specifically fix it. There might have been, but as I say, it wasn't my trade.
Yeah.
But one of my favourite funny memories of the whole thing was ensure zip undone 7 inches. But I know that when the American F4's reconnaissance versions were, and they're still using film reconnaissance in Vietnam.
Yep.
But from the time those things parked, a crew would rip out the camera spools, and they would have hard copies in hand 2 minutes after the aircraft stopped.
Gee.
Film out, processed, printed, 2 minutes.
That's
And
quick.
I thought, boy, that's almost better than digitized.
Yeah.
But
And that would be multiple copies too, wouldn't it?
yeah, but the camera and operating at high altitude interested me, and
Yeah.
my old schoolmate's dad photographed a lot of the sea battles of World War II off PNG, and I saw a lot of his original work, and he gave me some copies, but someone cleaned up for me one day, and it all went in the WPB. But Laurie, he gave us a Butte lecture once on the nature of the cameras.
Right.
He said if your British camera failed, you had to get a component that fitted that serial number of the camera.
Gee.
If an American camera failed, you had a generic part that would replace it. The manufacture precision was such that you didn't have to purchase a specific part for a specific serial number. And that was the difference between the British and the American cameras.
Yep.
So where possible, you got an American camera because it was easier to maintain.
Yeah. Okay, just a couple of quick ones. There's the man handling the cameras into the Spitfire. And these are the big ones that were either vertical or later on used as oblique while they're in. The middle photograph there, that's one of the WAFs who were the photo interpreters. And I put that in because they just had fantastic work with the photos that.
Constance Babington Smith.
Yes,
The one.
she is.
Yes.
And what was she known for?
Well, I don't quite know, other than that she pioneered photogrammetry or reconnaissance, as
Yeah.
I understand.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, she was one of the
Yeah.
chief.
The other thing I think is worth commenting on is the danger these photo reconnaissance pilots faced with post-strike raids. When you think of the
Yes.
photographs taken after the dams
Yeah, The
raid,
damage assist.
somebody had to go back and get the photos, and they're waiting for you.
Absolutely. And that's not just the dams, anything that where they had to do damage assessment. There's one guy whose name escapes me at the moment, a photo reconnaissance pilot, and he got 3 DFCs. 3, British guy.
She wrote the book Evidence in Camera,
Yes.
which it tells partly the Sydney Cotton story,
Yep.
but she was the first one after the war to really bring out and recognise the role of photo reconnaissance. And that was in the era before anybody knew about Enigma and the code breakers.
Yes.
So the photo reconnaissance took a lot of credit that they would have more correctly should have shared with the code breakers.
Yes.
But she, wrote that.
But they did a fair bit. The other thing that she's noted, I was going to go to the next photo in a minute, but yeah. One thing that, the other thing she's noted for is that she saw on these photographs these little lines in places in Belgium and France and Holland, and they're all, she worked out by triangulation, they're all pointing to London. And she went to her commanders and that and said, something's fishy going on here. All these things are pointing to London. I think this is something new that the Germans are doing. No, bugger off, it's not. It's just a bit of a ramp or something. And she got more and more photographs, and she went back a second time and a third time. And eventually they got some records from the French underground that said these ramps, they're firing bloody bombs, going to be firing bombs at London. It was the V1s. They didn't believe her.
Right, Warwick Henry here got a comment or two about those cameras, which we saw photographs of only up to a couple of minutes ago.
Yep.
When I was at Davy Air Services at one stage about late 1969, early 1970, working out of Deniliquin Charter Services there, we had one of those cameras which we mounted on a Comanche and a twin Comanche. With the Comanche, we took the right seat out, had to cut 2 holes into the floor and the bottom of the airplane. The camera mounted vertically there, and a camera operator could sit in the back seat with the camera in front of him to the right of the pilot. And we were taking photographs of the rice fields along the Murray River. Apparently some government department needed to know what area of size of these rice paddocks were. With the twin Comanche, we had it mounted outside the aeroplane on the left side, here where there's a small door at the back of the cabin for baggage. Cameras mounted out in the wind and taking vertical photographs from there and operated by a person from inside.
Just very quickly, there's a couple of images taken by Spitfire PR aircraft. The one on the left is the Ansaldo fitting yards in Genoa in Italy. Look at the detail on that. I might have to get a bit closer. The one on the right is Penamundi, and they're after the barrack areas, which is in here, and the stores. Sorry?
My father-in-law.
He probably did, yes.
One of those bombs.
Yep.
My father-in-law worked.
Oh.
He was catching them.
He's catching the bombs, was he? And there's Penamundi again. There's a semicircular structure there. That's where they were going to launch the V2s.
No other questions?
No other questions?
Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you.
Good on you, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.